Hello, you delicious people, and welcome back to another intimate episode of Intimate Conversations with a repeat gorgeous guest, dear friend, the amazing Amy Green Smith. Speak up for yourself without being a dick. Is that not a great tagline? I've ever heard one. In your very, very beautiful outfit, you always inspire me fashion-wise. When I was getting dressed for our interview today, I was like, I'm just not even going to try because I can't compete. I can't compete. I'm just going to wear my sexy, like whatever this and my little rings. I'm just going to be Allana and Amy's going to be Amy. And so let me tell you more about this extraordinary certified and credentialed life coach, hypnotherapist, masterful speaker, and personal empowerment expert. She uses her roles as coach, writer, podcaster, and speaker to move individuals to a place of radical personal empowerment and motherfucking worth. She didn't say motherfucking. I said motherfucking, but whatever. With acute focus on helping people find their voice. She is a highly sought after guru after her uncommon style of irreverence, wisdom, and humor. And she's been a featured expert and inspired Coach Magazine and on Fox 5 San Diego. And I remember, Amy, back when we first met, we were both like speaking at some event. And I was like, ooh, first of all, your energy, you have a presence when you come in a room. Two, what you said, I was like, oh, we are of the same tapestry cloth or what have you. And then over the years, you've just been so supportive to me with my son and my career and friendship and just your bravery in all that you do and how you've moved and now how you're saying you're coming out, I'm queer, like just your bravery, your authenticity, your heart, your high level consciousness. You're like really smart too. Super, not just brain smart, but like energetically smart. Like you read very deeply and very correctly. So, I appreciate you as my friend. I'm inspired by you as my colleague, and I'm really, really happy to have you back on the show. So welcome.
Well, I'm certainly going to be replaying that little intro anytime I'm down in the dumps. That was absolutely such a gift. Thank you for that. I have this habit of when I find a very like-minded spirit who I just feel must be in my life, I just kind of claim them. And I feel like I did that with you, where I was like, guess what? We're going to be friends. How about a sleepover? Let's get wine and cheese.
Yeah. And that's what we did. It was great.
Yeah. So I couldn't be more thrilled to be in your company. And I mean, I could gush and gush about the same things about you. And you were such an incredible force really early in my career, where you were already a good 5-10 years in ahead of me. And this was probably a good 15 years ago now, but I remember just how gracious you were and willing to, get on the phone and share your secrets. And I saw a lot of examples of business owners who I did not want to emulate. And then you got dropped in my lap, which was such a beautiful gift. So.
Oh, thank you. So this is just going to be a love fest, I think, because it does feel good to give to someone who can receive and appreciate you and has a deep drive in their soul to make an impact and do so unapologetically. I mean, we were just talking before the podcast started about, so what's new? And I'm like, with the app and the difficulty internal that I was facing, because I love people. That's just right. There's not a separate kind of people. I love all people. And so many people come to me who have been shamed by others and who then shame themselves and are not unapologetic. And I love to be that person that doesn't judge them. And it's come hard earned by learning not to judge me. And there's nothing more exquisite than being that safe space for another to feel safe and seen and understood, and then slap your fucking ass and get out there and have some fun and be you and all the rest of it. And, that's right. And you're the same. You're so, you've got people's back. You champion their authenticity. So for those that don't know your amazingness, give us a little background of how you came into what you do, more about what you do, and then we'll dive deeper into like personal evolution and stuff.
Sure. So I think not unlike a lot of other experts in the space, typically our biggest lessons are the things that kind of catapult us into sharing with others, right? So my whole concept and kind of mission of what I do is really twofold. And it's sort of the internal component of genuinely believing in your own worthiness, that you are enough, that you have intrinsic value, just period, that your voice matters. So
Yes.
there's that internal element. And then the external component of, okay, if I do believe this about myself, how does that now inform my relationships and how I engage with the outside world? Meaning, what are the actual words that I say to establish a boundary, to have a tough conversation, to say no and not be racked with guilt? And those are the things that I don't think we're really given a vernacular around. We're not told how to say, please don't touch my pregnant belly, stranger, or to tell your, you're like in my case, telling my family of origin that I don't subscribe to the religion that I was raised in. So my situation was, I grew up in a very extreme evangelical Christian family. My father had a master's in divinity and a doctorate in ministry. So he wasn't fucking around. And so, I had I still do. I have two younger siblings. And for a bit of context, I was by all accounts the good kid, right? I think you can relate. And I started working when I was 14. I put myself through college. I got married young and moved out of the house, was very self-sufficient. In contrast, my two younger siblings ended up doing jail time, had a lot of trouble with the law, didn't go any traditional routes of schooling or work. And that's all important because it kind of came to a head, I would say, in 2007, which was when my father passed away. So at the time, I had a background in makeup artistry. So I knew that I wanted to do the makeup for his viewing. So I was going to do dead dad makeup. And I just felt like it was kind of an asshole move if I had that skill set to be like, oh, dad, get your own makeup artist. I just felt like, of course I'm going to do that. Of course I will. So I also speak to a crowd of like hundreds of people. He had quite an impact in his own right. And we get back home to my mom's house and she finds it kind of the most opportune time to say, it feels as though your father and I failed as parents because the three of you, grouping me in with my siblings, are not, quote, walking with the Lord.
Oh.
So it didn't matter that I hadn't done jail time or that I, was self-sufficient or that I had just done fucking makeup on my dad's corpse. Yes. I was a disappointment because I wasn't subscribing to that rigid dogma. So the only thing I could kind of muster in that moment was to say to her, you probably shouldn't say that to a child. And she was like, well, that's just how I feel. And that really was the pivotal moment when I realized that speaking up for yourself or establishing boundaries, really, they're actually very seldomly an ultimatum. But every once in a while, you'll come across an incident like that where you have to choose between making that person happy or making you happy. Yeah. And I realized that I had spent so much time twisting and contorting and shape-shifting to please my family. Yeah. And that was at a severe cost to self. So up until that time, I had always prepped my husband, like every time we would go see my family, I'd say, okay, no cussing, no drinking, no talking about liberal agenda or Jon Stewart or, none of that. So we can't talk about any of it, not South Park. Don't watch any of that. And then it became after that sort of initial switch or flip got switched, it became sort of this avalanche and I became incredibly adversarial, combative. And I would have these huge blow-ups with my mom. And it wasn't until I cleaned up a bunch of those messes that I realized, oh, I think I can actually communicate differences of opinion in a much more powerful way. And that really became then this concept of speaking up for yourself without being a dick, without being an asshole, that you can have some of the most polarizing conversations, like asking an adult child to move out of the house, asking for a divorce, telling your family you don't believe in the religion you were raised in, coming out of the closet, you know, anything like that. And you can do it with the utmost grace and kindness. And that's really informed the work that I do now.
Wow. Fucking love you more every time you talk. So back in Toastmasters days, like 22 to 25 years ago, Manhattan Beach, moved from New York City to LA, and I was the Toastmaster president, whatever. And I did these speeches. They taught us about sandwiches. And when you communicate with somebody to give them constructive criticism, you put it in a sandwich. And you say something positive, or something that you're aligned on, or something that will put their walls down and create affinity or connection. And then I added this little piece when it comes to communicating about asking for permission, like, is now a good time, or may I speak from my heart, or, you know, again, more ways to make the connection happen. And then it's I, not you, a feeling, you know, expressing your own truth. And then toss it over to them, not like an ultimatum, but like, and how do you feel? And what if this resonates for you? Or I'd love to know what's true for you about this kind of idea. And I didn't make it up. It sort of came from Toastmasters, but it's been a great structure to have that heart open, authentic connection in a collaborative way. And letting it be totally okay to agree to disagree. Like total allowance. So that's what I've learned up till now. Tell us more about how you support people getting to grace and kindness when establishing boundaries or choosing to agree to disagree.
Sure. So there's a couple of key things that I think are really important to underline first. The first is the communication tactics that I teach people are very, very different if they're engaging with somebody who is abusive, highly narcissistic, because I do find, and I think it's worth the caveat, because I do find a lot of folks who will come into my work and they think it's just a communication issue. They think I just need to learn how to communicate better. And that's not necessarily the case. So, so the advice that I'm going to share right now, let's assume that we're dealing with fairly rational, emotionally healed to some extent individuals. Okay. The first thing to dovetail off of what you were talking about with the sandwich, a couple of great entry points in psychology, a lot of times they'll call them soft startup. So instead of going into a conversation and saying, we need to talk, which nobody fucking is excited about that, and they will immediately armor up, guards up. Instead, conversational consent, which is what you said. Ask for the time to talk. A lot of times when we get really emboldened and, okay, I'm ready to finally address this, we discount if our partner maybe just got home and they just got their ass handed to them by their boss, or maybe they just woke up, or maybe they've been in a depressed place. So you really have to take into account, is that other person capable of having the heaviness of the conversation I'm ready to impart? So that's first. Asking for the time to talk and saying something like, hey, there's a couple things I'd love to run by you, or I'd really like to get your thoughts on something, or there's something that I'd really like to toss around. All of that sort of languaging is so much more disarming than we need to talk. The next element of that kind of soft startup is either one of two tactics. Either expressing gratitude can be really helpful, or expressing gratitude and owning your shit, really owning your shit. So one of the ways that we can own our shit is the fact that we haven't spoken up before. So the way that might sound is, hey, there's a handful of things that have been kind of feeling a bit prickly for me or rubbing me the wrong way. And I haven't been vocal about that at all with you. And that is wildly unfair to you. And there's some stuff I would just really like to share, because I don't want to be building up resentment. That's super unfair. And then you talk about your request. My request is just hear me out. I would love it if you just gave me the space to kind of get this out. It might be kind of clunky. It might be kind of messy. And then I would love to hear your input, because almost always you will get cut off.
Yep. Yep.
If you express something about, a grievance or something you'd like rectified, no matter what type of relationship it is, if you don't preface it at the beginning of, here's my request, if you're up for it, I'd really like to just get this out, and caveat the fuck out of it. It might be kind of clunky and messy. I appreciate you hanging in here with me. Yeah. And then I would really, really love to hear your perspective.
Stunning.
Right?
That's stunning.
And that's if it's a collaborative relationship.
For sure.
If it's not, and if it's like a hard and fast boundary, like I will not accept this any longer, then the tone can be a little bit different. But if we're talking about two individuals who actually want to rectify something,
yeah,
that can be helpful. Or the gratitude element of thank you so much for taking the time to talk. Yeah. Or I really appreciate you just being willing to hear me out, especially if it's a volatile relationship, like with a family member, let's say, where you've been avoiding actually talking to one another.
Yeah.
And just saying, I know this is really messy, and I just really appreciate you being here with me. That level of vulnerability.
Yes.
Will naturally extract the vulnerability from the other person. It's your best chance. They may not always meet you, but they sure as fuck have a better chance of meeting you there than if you go in with all your walls up, being like, here's what you're doing wrong. You.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this is phenomenal. I love this. The conscious connection calls in Heartmates is a dyad format where the rules are right up front. All you get to say is thank you. And thank you does not mean I agree. It just means I heard you. And if you don't understand, you ask for clarity. But it's not about reaching a resolution in that format. It's just about seeking understanding. And it tends to, when you lead with a question that first builds affinity and then another one that builds alignment before you get to that deeper one, and then the framework is there to just say thank you. Even if you don't get the resolution in the conversation, it sometimes resolves itself just in the expression. My experience is that the listener is quite often the more powerful partner. That if you can just listen without justifying, interrupting, they don't need to talk about everything. They don't say as much, and they feel heard and understood. And quite often, right before my very eyes, they're like, you know what? I'm really sorry. I've been a real bitch, haven't I? I'm like, they'll just own it right in front of you if you don't make them wrong. And you can just be that listener in allowance. So I love what you're saying. And yeah, I also often say, if they can't hear you, why are you talking to a wall? Like, why are you even having the conversation? So please go deeper into if this is abusive or narcissistic, because not everybody can hear, no matter how you communicate.
So I would say the main indicator to look for in the relationship historically, and you really have to look at this from a neutral place. So don't try to journal around this or think about this after you just got in a heated argument with that person, because they can do no right in your eyes after that. Okay. So you need to be in more of a like calm, tranquil space.
Yeah.
And I want you to think about historically your conversations with this individual or interactions. If they have literally never, not once, seen their role in the matter or owned a piece of it or said, you know what, I can really appreciate where you're coming from, or although I don't feel the same way, I would never want you to incur hurt in that manner. A narcissist will say, you shouldn't feel that way, therefore I'm dismissing your whole experience.
Yes.
And that can happen for all of us from time to time, where we just don't agree and we're so irritable. And so we do dismiss that person. But if it's a chronic way of being, where you never see that person take ownership in any way, not just the way you want them to take it, but in any way, because they might be taking some ownership. It's just not what you want to see. So you dismiss it. But I do think that there's sort of this epidemic that's happening in the personal growth field where we label everybody as fucking toxic, instead of really examining what's happening with the dynamics inside of that relationship. So many times when I ask people, have you spoken up about this, or have you shared this with that person? They say, yes, absolutely, all the time. How have you said it? How have you shared it? And they're like, well, I get like, well, if you want me to do that, then you better blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, how would you respond to that? Yeah. If you wouldn't want to see somebody coming at you like a bat out of hell, then they probably don't either. Yeah. And when we get in that threatened space, we behave from our lizard brain fear responses. We will fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And the fawning is the placating, is just saying what you want to hear so that I can fly under the radar, and then nothing fucking changes. Yes. So when I talk about communication, the importance of your delivery is paramount, but it's the one element that we all want to dismiss because we feel so validated and vindicated in our pain that we feel like, because you did that thing that was so shitty, I'm allowed to speak to you like this. I'm allowed to try to get my needs met by cutting you down or telling you, well, I wouldn't have to do that if you didn't do this. And well, what do you expect from me? So, and then we think that that's somehow going to create change. You are 100% responsible for your delivery. Are you allowed to be pissed the fuck off? Absolutely. 100%. You are always allowed to feel what you feel, but communicating from that place will very, very seldomly ever yield the results you're looking for. Yeah. Yeah. I love this. And just a little piece about that. Just hitting a pillow, having a good scream, dancing to heavy metal and throwing I don't know, like whatever. What is your favorite way to just process the anger till you can come back to center and communicate from a healthy place? There's so many different options. At 2016 election, I immediately bought a fucking punching bag because I was like, this is going to be a rough ride and I'm going to need to punch some shit. So, and I've had clients who've done the same thing. You can find anything old that you're not going to use anymore. If it's clothing, rip it apart. If it's, you know, an old technology you're not going to use, beat the shit out of it in your, breaking stuff, scribbling, ripping paper, anything that's expelling that energy that you're holding. And that also really underlines the point of you don't want to try to communicate when you're in that any heightened emotional state, because you tend to communicate from that primitive fight, flight, response. So really trying to usher in that calmness before you go into that conversation and being ready to shut down the conversation if it's starting to get out of control. Thank you. And in terms of shutting down that conversation, what does that sound like? Sure. So a great kind of bridge statement. So I will use a series of bridge statements that are either entering into a conversation or entering out. Entering out, or I guess escaping, would be saying something like, I don't think either one of us are really hearing each other well. I think we should take a time out. Or if it's any type of abuse, you're a bitch, you're controlling, you're a bad mom, anything like that, that's verbally abusive. And you can say, I do not appreciate the way this is going. I am going to go into the other room. Or you are allowed to have whatever feelings you have around this. You are not allowed to name call me. Thank you. Or I'm happy to continue talking to you about this, but not if you speak to me in that manner. Any number of those. And then y'all write that shit down, rehearse it. You have to rehearse it because our natural instincts are going to kick in of either fighting, going batshit crazy, fleeing, just running away, not saying a damn thing, freeze, or we placate, we fawn. We try to make sure everything's okay over there, Absolutely. We just froze and we'll get the editor to smush that together. But okay. Can you just say that last line again? Like you have to rehearse that. Yes. So you have to rehearse that because if you don't have something ready, wired in that subconscious part of the mind, all of your primitive fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses are going to kick in. And guess what? A lot of that is shit we saw our parents do, the ways we stayed safe as a child. All of that stuff is wired into the subconscious. So just because you consciously know, oh, I can speak up for myself, or, oh, she can't talk to me like that. They can't talk to me like that. That's not going to come out naturally unless you start programming it and really think about what are my go-to phrases? What am I going to say? and then really genuinely rehearsing them in front of your mirror.
Yeah, I love this. I love this. And I would imagine the very same skills that we're talking about ought to be applied to how we speak to ourselves.
100%.
Right?
100%. I mean, we have boundaries with ourselves. We have boundaries with others. We have, the way in which we speak to one another. I think another huge piece of this communication, and this could be helpful with internal speak too, is instead, and you alluded to this earlier, instead of saying, you do this, you do that, saying, I've had the experience of feeling blah, 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 when this happens.
Yes.
If you can remove the you, and you can say things like, it seems as though sometimes there's a disconnect, or sometimes it feels like I'm being dismissed, or, where you're not just saying, you dismiss me.
Yes. Yes.
It's just ways in which you rephrase it that land. It's not because they deserve it. That's not what we're saying. It's so that you can be heard better.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what this is all in service for. So being able to just kind of softly explain, here's how I have interpreted that situation, or here's how it's landed over here for me, or here's what I make that mean, and taking responsibility for your interpretation within the situation can be huge. Now, with that additional caveat that I was talking about earlier, if somebody constantly says, well, I'm sorry, that's what you make up in your head, or I'm sorry, that's your experience, or I'm sorry, you keep interpreting that way, and they never take ownership for, oh, wow, I am so sorry that my actions incurred hurt. I am so sorry for that.
Yes. Yes.
They don't have to agree, but they do need to be respectful. They do have to own that there has been impact. Yeah.
And when you you slow down in a calm, neutral state, and you're like, you know what? They have never owned this. They've never owned this. Then we go, okay, we've got a codependent narcissistic dynamic here, if we want to label it, but basically, it's not a collaborative relationship anymore. It's a one-sided relationship. There's no we or us in that world. And it's time to complete. Do you have any ways that you think are best? Because if they can't hear you in the first place, why does it even fucking matter how you do it at that point?
Yes, that's absolutely right. That's 100% right. The most important thing, without a shadow of a doubt, is your safety. So I will throw speaking up for yourself out the window and assertiveness out the window if you need to care for your personal safety. That is always 100% the most important thing. Then it becomes, well, first of all, I want to say, if you are in that situation, it's highly likely that you are unbelievably kind, empathic. It's likely that you're also a people pleaser and are highly invested in the opinions of other people. But that is because those are usually the dynamics that attract one another. Oh, I can save you. Oh, I can use you. Let's get together, right? So if you are that way, recognize that you probably developed those behavioral tactics to take care of yourself. It's probably something you learned in childhood. It's probably I know you have that situation with your father, right? It's like, I knew I needed to people please to stay out of harm's way as a child. And then that starts to filter into your adult relationships. And in those situations, we're never rooting for the person we're with to be an abuser. We especially if you're that individual, you're trying to see the good in everybody. You're trying to see the potential in everybody. So recognize that likely the reason why you are in this situation is because you have such an incredible heart. So now we need to take that incredible heart and pair it with some really rich self-worth and self-esteem that says, I don't deserve this. I deserve reciprocity. So once you've established that your safety is intact and that there's nothing like that that's going to harm you, then you can say, it seems as though we are at an impasse and the things that you are looking for in a partner are not matching the things that I'm looking for a partner. And I think that it's best that we part ways, right? Now, it is likely that that other person, if they're not getting their way, they will hurl insults, they will throw insults, they will say, you're so irrational, you're so emotional, you did all whatever. it's important that you do not take the bait. They will try to bait you. They will try to say shit to you that's hurtful about your children, or like really try to spear you in the gut. It's important that you do not take the bait, and you just reiterate your line. You say, as I mentioned, for the reasons that you are clearly illustrating right now, we are not meant to be together. Here's what that means. Here's what that's going to look like. And you don't ask for permission. You say, I'm going to be moving my stuff out, or I would like for you to find a place to stay, or that means I'm not coming over any longer. I'll pick up my, whatever. You get to the logistics, but don't take the bait and keep underlining the boundary. I understand that you're upset. I'm not comfortable being in this relationship anymore. You're allowed to feel how you feel, but I can no longer be in a relationship with somebody I don't feel safe with. Any number of those things.
This is so good. Never did I think we'd be having the conversation of me being in one of those abusive relationships when I'm such a stand for communication and living unapologetically. And yet there's the next level of, I believe, compassion for myself, healing of my insecurities, honoring, as you said, my humongous heart.
Exactly.
And also letting go of any misconstrued superiority. I'll just be frank. Like, I thought, like, why do you stay? Like, get out of an abusive relationship. Because I was always on the outside looking in until I lived in one. And that amount of self-shame, how did I get here? Oh, I just got to fix it. Mixed with terror of the next attack, physical and verbal, and how within 10 months I lost myself, Amy. And if it wasn't for him destroying my phone and calling the police on me, who was screaming my head off, bloody and bruised, and they carted him off to the police, to the jail, I think I probably would have gone in for another round. Because my empathy was huge. My desire to help him heal was huge. I loved him, or so I thought. And I was just so beaten down in terms of my confidence. It was super humbling, and I'm grateful for the lesson. So I stopped judging others whose shoes I have not walked in. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, what's so curious. So here's something that I think you're pointing to that I think is really important to underline is it's likely that you can look back at those interactions and there are some genuinely happy memories. There are some genuine great interactions. In fact, I recently interviewed a gal from my podcast who had gotten out of a cult, and we were talking about the same concepts that you're discussing here of like, how did I fucking get here?
Yeah.
And she was talking about, I had some really incredible interactions with this woman who was like, and so it's hard to parse out because we think, oh, if you're an abuser, you're always shitty. You're always awful. But you have this other element of things that you hold on to. We do this with parents. We do this because we are so connected and we're rooting for the people who gave us life to actually be safe for us. We are always rooting for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they give us any inkling that there might be hope, we attach to that. Yeah. So I'll give you the same advice that I originally grabbed from my vet. And we were trying to decide, when is it time to put my pup down? Right. Wow. This was actually in 2017. And he said, you start checking off the good days versus the bad days. And when we get to a point where the bad days are outweighing the good significantly, like we've got 5 bad days and maybe 2 good ones. Yeah. Now we're dealing with a quality of life that is not good. And I've actually given that to clients and students to keep a calendar and, or to keep a tally of how many times did this person come through for me and where we met one another. And then how many times did they let me down and actually tally it. Think about almost if you had 2 giant pickle jars and you had to put a coin in one every single time they came through for you. And then every time they let you down goes in the other one. What would you visually be looking at? So does that stuff that in that one pickle jar have value? Sure. Is it worth as much as the pain in the other pickle jar? Fuck no. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a way that you can stand in gratitude for those pure moments as information of like, oh, when he did this or when she did that, I did really love that. I do want that in my next relationship.
Yes.
It can all be information. It can all be learning.
Yeah, this is great. And it just dawns on me that how many days of empowered living versus disempowered interactions. When I look back at my dad, well, now he's dry. And so we have a much better relationship than we've ever had. In fact, we talked last night and we laughed our ass off. It was great. But back when he was drunk and stoned every day, there were 14 bad days with half a day of good. And that was life. That was life. And so I mean, I've known this, but there's something that's more embodied, having what I just went through and our long-term friendship and your wisdom and your inspiration. And I love you and my heart is open. All these factors together. I'm like, oh, that's the blind spot where I work so hard to create safety, to create connection, to pretzel and survive. That's in my blood. And the good part of that is I'm so intuitive and I hear behind the words and I'm so aware. I'm a great coach as a result of that. On the other side of that, I put up with a lot. And in fact, I'm even attracted to that dynamic because it's so familiar.
That's right.
I put up with so much for so long, just waiting for that one afternoon. And I would suck the marrow out of that afternoon. So I'm really grateful in this moment to go, oh, I'm seeing yet another level of what I put up with. Thinking that's normal. And then of course, underneath that thinking, well, what did I do wrong? It was always back to, I'll take responsibility. I need to be more compassionate. I need to be more patient. I need to be, and sometimes, no, I just need to leave. Yeah,
that's right. And that's also why, if we're talking about the difference in the subconscious and the conscious, you can know, and I'm sure you've had brilliant folks on the show who've talked about that stuff, but just in ballpark terms, our conscious mind is like 5 to 10% of our mind power. Subconscious, which is where all of our beliefs are housed, our habits, our fight flight response, all of that, we're talking 90 to 95%. So that means it doesn't really matter how much that this shouldn't happen in a relationship or he shouldn't do that to me. If there is a positive association with, I can survive this, or this is healthy, or this is familiar, or this is family, you will continue to seek that out. You will, it's another opportunity. That relationship is another opportunity to heal the father wound. If I couldn't save him, maybe I can save you.
Totally. Yeah. And if I wasn't good enough for him, maybe I'll be good enough for you.
That's right.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad. 52 years. I'm still learning. And I'll never stop. This is so good. So if we bridge this over, and we were talking earlier before the show started about the app and my stand for it being inclusive. And what we're really about is partnering with ourselves. I'm calling it a partnering app, not a dating app. Partnering with ourselves, becoming our best self, coming home to ourselves. And then from that place, unapologetically showing up, speaking up, using our voice matters, and aligning with friends and allies and lovers that are in alignment with that as we all live authentically. So that's the overarching theme. As I was developing this, I'm like, okay, so I can handle the sexual orientation, gender identification, but now I'm learning, well, it would be open marriages. It would be polyamorous. It would be monogamous. It would be arranged. Like there's no judgment on any way we choose to love. And so tell us your evolution in your sexuality and the internal conversation, the conversation with your husband, and the way you've created a life of even greater authenticity and expression.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so glad that you are doing that. I think I am so 100% behind this app and your vision. And I'm just so glad that you're continuing to hold on to that, because the world needs it like yesterday. So, not surprisingly, growing up in an evangelical family, you had one option, and that was to be cisgendered and straight. And I think I'm really fortunate, and I recognize the privilege that, I identify now as pansexual, which is basically attracted to the human and not necessarily any
Yes.
type of gender. So I could very realistically see myself with, somebody who identified as a woman, somebody who was a trans man, trans woman, non-binary. Like I have found all different genders to be incredibly attractive.
Mm.
And I can see that back in my youth. In fact, all of my first sexual experiences were with women.
Mm.
And I very specifically cut myself off because I knew that I was also attracted to men, and I knew that that was an easier path to follow.
Sure.
And I don't think I ever, this is, all like kind of high school time. I don't think I ever really, we didn't have the vocabulary around it, first of all.
Yeah.
And I also went to a private school all my life, private Christian school. So it wasn't, that was just of the devil and temptation and all of those things. So, so I always thought, oh, it's just, you just experiment. I never thought about that actually being my identity or who I am.
Yeah.
And when I got married, we went through a phase, like kind of in the first year, where I was really, really attracted to one of my bridesmaids, actually. And so we kind of had to navigate that. And it was really, I never once thought I was going to leave my husband, or like, oh, I need to go explore this or anything like that. But I also didn't feel like I was anything other than straight. Like I didn't feel like I could claim that moniker.
Yeah.
So, but in my personal life with a lot of my close friends, I've been very open that like, I think I could have lived my life with a woman, like I can see myself in tons of different scenarios. I'm glad I'm in the one that I'm in. He makes me, just sublimely happy. You've gotten to meet him. He's quite the gem. So we've been always very open about that. And in fact, I had never heard this term before, but we saw a therapist quite a while back, and she asked us what we identify as. And I said, I identify as pansexual. And he said, well, straight. And she goes, I think you're actually heteroflexible. There's a term for that. And he was like, what do you mean? She said, well, that you prefer heterosexual relationships, but you're not like, I have to be with a straight woman. I have, if your wife is bi or pan or whatever, you're a little flexible. And he was like, oh shit, now I'm a part of the queer community too. But here's the other thing that I'll say. I did a very public like declaration on Facebook. A majority of the folks in my inner circle already knew, and it didn't change anything, for my marriage. But I think that there are a large swath of individuals, and I've actually met them the more I'm open about it, who were like, I just didn't feel like I had any right to take up space in the queer community because my life hasn't been hard. I've been in this hetero passing relationship that by all intents and purposes looks like I'm straight. And there's absolutely truth to that. I don't think that I'm the voice to like lead a movement and be in front of folks, or talk about a really difficult lived experience as a queer individual. But I also think that it's really dangerous anytime we say to somebody, you don't get to take up space, or you don't get to live your truth, or you don't get to acknowledge who you really are. Yeah. So I'm not throwing it in my bios anywhere online or anything, but I am open to talking about it because I think there are far more people who are on sort of a sliding scale of sexuality who don't realize that they actually have that freedom, and you get to acknowledge it. And if you want to label it, great. And if you don't, that's fine too. I'm grateful for all of the freedom socially that we have at this time and space. We have a long, long way to go. That's 100% sure. But I do think the more open we are about the whole spectrum of human experience that we go through, whether it's related to gender or sexuality, I think is incredibly important.
I love this. I love this conversation. What were the first conversations with yourself that felt the most loving and true in terms of your sexuality? How did you begin to honor your true desires? Do you remember what that sounded like inside of your heart?
You know, I think, and this will definitely not resonate for everybody, but it was a label. It was taking on the identity of, I am queer, and having that be like beautiful and celebrated, and also not changing a damn thing in my life, you know, which again is riddled with privilege. I recognize, I fully understand that. But I do think just, it also gives me a unique perspective with folks who do assume that I'm straight, who say dipshit stuff in front of me. And so then I get this really awesome educational opportunity to say, oh, I'm actually queer. I know that you don't, and then watch them freak the fuck out.
Yeah.
So that's a fun thing. But as far as internal, it was really the claiming of it. And, you know, for so long, it was, oh, I just experimented when I was young, or, oh, I went through that phase, right? We want to be flippant about that, which we so nobly allow for women, cis women, but not for cis men, which is such bullshit and also rooted in the patriarchy.
Yeah.
But that was really healing for me. And I've continued, the more I've spoken about it or acknowledged it, the better it feels.
Yeah. I can feel it. I can feel it as you share it. Yeah. It's home. It's home in your bones. Yeah.
Totally.
And how do you navigate your marriage, talking about partnership with others or desires or fantasies, with your hetero flexible?
Isn't that a funny term? We have a term for everything. You know, honestly, not much has changed in that way. Like, we'll continue to, like, if we watch like adult movies together, he, you know, I'm attracted to certain things, so he'll look for women that have certain physical features that I find really attractive. So he's very like, oh, I think you would like this woman. There are certain things that I do find really attractive that aren't really in his wheelhouse, like extremely, you know, mask women or trans men or things like that. But it's not up for his wheel. It's not really his wheelhouse. So we just kind of, I'll handle that separately. You know, we've always been really generous with each other of like, your sexuality is something I'm a part of. I don't get to own that.
Yes.
I don't get to own your sexuality. I don't get to be involved with every single element of it. And we've just really, and granted, everybody listening, we've been together 25 years. It's been a minute to cultivate all of that. It just didn't happen overnight. But a lot of it, you know, to circle back, comes from communicating with each other and being really vulnerable and open and honest. And then each one of us continuing to be a soft place to land, even if we're hurt, to actually say, I'm really hurt by that. I need to take a step back. I need to process that. He went through that when we were entertaining this idea of like a threesome. And of course, he's immediately thinking another woman. And the woman that I'm picturing in my head is more of like a masked lesbian. And that's not what he's picturing. And then he had to kind of grapple with that. So we had sort of this like, oh, that's what you're also into. And then also, to his credit, he's never once been threatened by it. You know, I'm like, I just happen to have more options if I was single, but I'm not. I've chosen to be in a monogamous relationship, and I've chosen you, and I've chosen to stay and nurture, and I don't want to go anywhere else. So, yeah, it's just been, I would say, even more intimate, because what we're sharing is vulnerable.
Yes, exactly. I love this. I remember back being at your place in California and you sharing, I believe it was something like, so are you in the mood? No. Yeah. Can I get you in the mood?
Yes.
Yeah. And then, okay, or are you in the mood? No. Can I get you in the mood? No. Then I'm going to take care of myself. And this like radical permission to be real and vulnerable and honoring and communicate, and no shame and total allowance. And I was like, dang, you guys are amazing. And, and I've shared many times, Amy Green, this is what she taught me, so I'm going to teach you. And so it just deepening that in all these different nuances sounds like what you're doing. How beautiful. Well, it radiates off of your groundedness, your confidence, your unapologetic nature. I can't wait to see you on so many more podcasts and stages and filled auditoriums as you empower us all to remind us that our voice matters and that communication is so, so powerful. Thank you. What are you up to? How do you want people to play with you? Where should we send them?
Yeah. So like any self-respecting Gen Xer, I hang out the most on Instagram. But you can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm starting to up my presence a little bit on LinkedIn, if that's your thing. I'm a voyeur on TikTok, so I don't do anything on there, but you can find me everywhere under the handle, Hey, Amy Green Smith. And basically on all social platforms, most on Insta. But if you go over to my site, which is amygreensmith.com, you'll see I have tons of freebies. I've got a free ebook that's really like a workbook with a bunch of challenges. We've got a free hypnosis track that's really, really helpful if you struggle with anxiety or fear. So tons of freebies. I've been doing a podcast for 9 years, myself. So you can have a listen to that. It's called A Bold-Faced Truth. And what I'm doing mostly right now, anybody listening, is speaking and really taking that message on more stages with women's groups, with mixed audiences, corporations who want to foster a deeper type of connection and communication and learn how to communicate with one another, or how to contend with some of the things like fear and imposter complex and all of that shows up for us also disproportionately as women, and also enoughness. So those are kind of the three major topics: boundaries, contending with fear, enoughness, believing in your own worth. So hit me up if you want me to come speak to your group. And I don't have to cuss, by the way.
I like to, but I don't have to.
It's a perk. I prefer it, but I kind of feel like, okay, if you want me to take my shoes off when I come into your house, I'll take my shoes off. I think it's a matter of respect. So
yes. I love it. I love it. Thank you. I wholeheartedly concur. Go to her site, download all the goodies, have her at your organization. You are such a gift to this planet. I'm so glad we're connected again. It's like this DNA spiral that just keeps coming back around for another round. I'm so grateful. Yeah. So from your beautiful heart, delicious pussy, exuberant, gorgeous style, all the things. What is your last message to our hearts, my love?
There was so much that we danced around here within, such a short time frame. And a lot of the things that I'm so emphatic about took decades to arrive to decades to create. So I think sometimes when we listen to quote unquote experts, we think that it's something that we're just supposed to snap and it's going to change, or some switch that we just don't seem to know how to flip. And it's really not. It's a lifetime of learning. So I want you to think about just any small baby step that you can take. Is it a conversation? Is it asking for the time to talk? Is it recognizing what's happening in your own relationship, taking a little bit of an inventory, but just keep taking baby steps. That's how we end up, running the marathon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. It gives me encouragement as I embark on this app, which is a big deal, and that it is so needed. And just baby steps, I will get there. So thank you for that personal encouragement. Thank you for empowering all of us, whether you're looking at her beautifulness or hearing her sexy voice. And I'd like you, as this interview comes to a completion, take a moment to reflect. There were gems throughout all of this. There were mic drops throughout all of this. Go to the one that meant the most to you. Take a moment, journal, contemplate, go for a walk, and take an action. because it's absolutely possible that something you heard will change the trajectory of your life. And that's what we do this for. We do it because we love you. We do it because we want to empower you. But ultimately, we want your life to be different because you took this hour for yourself. So take that action. Let us know what happens. We're here for you every week here on Intimate Conversations. And I love you with all my heart.